Back in the 1950s, mothers across the nation wielded their soup ladles like magic wands, transforming yesterday's leftovers and today's simple ingredients into tomorrow's hearty meal. These weren't just recipes passed down through church cookbooks and neighbors' whispered secrets. They were the backbone of family dinner tables, the comfort that welcomed fathers home from work and sent children off to school with full stomachs and warm hearts. Chicken noodle soup. The undisputed queen of the American soup pot, chicken noodle soup reigned supreme in every 1950s household. Mothers would start with a whole chicken on Sunday, using every precious morsel to create this golden elixir of comfort. The ritual began early in the morning, the birds simmering gently while families attended church, filling the house with an aroma that promised warmth and healing. What made this soup legendary wasn't just its ability to cure whatever ailed you, but the way it stretched a single chicken to feed a family of 6 for 3 days straight. Smart housewives would pick every strand of meat from the bones, toss in thick egg noodles that absorbed the rich broth, and add carrots and celery for substance. It was more than food. It was a hug in a bowl. Tomato soup. Campbell's may have made it famous, but 1950s homemakers knew the real magic happened when they opened that iconic red and white can and transformed it into something extraordinary. This wasn't just about heating up soup. It was about creating a canvas for culinary creativity that turned a simple 15-cent can into a feast fit for a king. The smart housewife always had a case of tomato soup in the pantry because it was the Swiss Army knife of the kitchen. Mixed with milk instead of water, it became a creamy tomato bisque. Thinned with beef broth and loaded with leftover vegetables, it transformed into hearty vegetable soup. But the real genius was in the grilled cheese partnership, that perfect marriage creating comfort food that turned the grumpiest child into a happy eater. Cream of mushroom soup. Before it became the base for countless casseroles, cream of mushroom soup stood proudly on its own as a sophisticated starter that made any 1950s dinner party feel elegant. Housewives discovered that this versatile soup could transform their dining rooms into fancy restaurants without breaking the family budget or requiring culinary school training. The beauty lay in its dual personality. Served in delicate china bowls with a sprinkle of fresh parsley, it welcomed guests with an air of refinement that made even Tuesday night dinners feel special. But mixed with tuna and served over toast points, it became a quick and satisfying lunch that busy mothers could prepare while managing 3 children and a load of laundry. Smart cooks learned to stretch the canned version by adding fresh sliced mushrooms, a splash of sherry, and a dollop of real cream. Split pea and ham soup. Nothing announced the arrival of autumn, quite like the first pot of split pea and ham soup bubbling away on the stove. This thick, hearty soup was the ultimate expression of 1950s frugality and flavor, transforming a leftover ham bone into liquid gold that could feed a family for days. The magic began with that precious ham bone, saved religiously from Sunday's dinner and stored carefully until soup day arrived. Smart housewives knew that bone held the key to flavor that no store-bought soup could match. As it simmered slowly with dried split peas, the marrow would seep out, creating a rich, smoky base. The transformation was miraculous. Tough, inedible peas would slowly dissolve into a thick, creamy soup that clung to the spoon like velvet, while the ham bone gave up every last morsel of meat. Ham and bean soup. Saturday nights in 1950s, America often meant baked beans. But Sunday afternoons belonged to ham and bean soup, the glorious second act that proved yesterday's dinner could become today's masterpiece. This wasn't just about using leftovers. It was about understanding that some flavors needed time to develop their full potential. The foundation started with those beautiful navy beans, small white gems that had been soaking overnight, like tiny promises of tomorrow's feast. Combined with the leftover ham bone and any remaining beans from Saturday's dinner, they created a soup that was both familiar and entirely new. The slow, simmering process worked like kitchen alchemy, transforming simple ingredients into something that tasted like it had been cooking in an old country farmhouse for generations. What made this soup special was its ability to improve with time, becoming transcendent after flavors married overnight in the refrigerator. Beef barley soup. When winter winds rattled the windows and snow piled against the front door, mothers across America reached for their biggest pot and began the ritual of beef barley soup creation. This wasn't just cooking. It was an act of love that transformed tough, inexpensive cuts of beef into something so tender and flavorful it would make the whole family forget about the cold outside. The secret was in the slow transformation. Chunks of beef that started the day tough enough to sole a shoe would spend hours simmering gently, breaking down into fork-tender morsels that practically melted on the tongue. The barley worked its own magic, absorbing the rich beef broth while releasing starches that thickened the soup into something substantial enough to qualify as a complete meal. This was peasant food elevated to an art form, humble ingredients treated with respect and patience until they became extraordinary. Potato soup. In the hierarchy of comfort foods, potato soup held a place of honor that went beyond mere sustenance. It was the ultimate expression of making something extraordinary from the most ordinary ingredients. Every 1950s, housewife had her own version, passed down from mothers and grandmothers, who understood that potatoes were more than just a side dish. The beauty lay in its infinite variations. Some mothers preferred it chunky, with pieces of potato swimming in thin, flavorful broth. Others mashed their potatoes right in the pot, creating a thick, creamy base that coated the spoon like velvet. The smart ones did a little of both, creating texture and richness that pleased every palate. But the real magic happened when creative cooks started adding their personal touches. Crispy bacon crumbles, melted cheddar cheese, green onions, sour cream, and paprika turned it into something that looked like it came from a fancy restaurant. Vegetable beef soup. The ultimate clean out the refrigerator soup, vegetable beef soup was where 1950s housewives proved their kitchen wizardry by transforming odds and ends into a masterpiece that looked like it was planned all along. This wasn't about following a strict recipe. It was about understanding flavors and having the confidence to trust your instincts. The foundation was always the same. A rich beef broth created from browning soup bones until the kitchen filled with that deep, meaty aroma that promised good things to come. But from there, each pot became a unique creation based on what vegetables were available and what needed to be used up. Carrots and celery were the reliable constants, providing sweetness and crunch that balanced the rich beef flavor. But creative cooks knew that almost anything could find a home in this soup. Leftover green beans, the last few potatoes, that lonely can of corn sitting in the pantry. Clam chowder. Geography might have dictated whether your family preferred New England's creamy white chowder or Manhattan's tomato-based red version. But every 1950s, coastal family knew that clam chowder was more than just soup. It was a celebration of local bounty and regional pride. The New England version was pure comfort food, with tender clams swimming in a rich, cream-based broth, thickened with potatoes and flavored with just enough salt pork to add depth without overwhelming the delicate seafood flavor. Manhattan clam chowder told a different story, with its bright red tomato base creating a lighter, more vegetable-forward soup that reflected the melting pot culture of New York City. Oyster stew. Christmas Eve. In many 1950s, households meant one thing: oyster stew, served in the finest china bowls as families gathered to celebrate the season with a tradition that connected them to their earliest American ancestors. This wasn't just soup. It was liquid luxury that transformed a simple meal into an elegant celebration worthy of the most special occasions. The preparation was deceptively simple, but it required perfect timing and gentle handling to create something truly special. Fresh oysters were heated just until their edges began to curl, never long enough to become tough and chewy. The milk was warmed separately, often with a bay leaf for subtle flavoring, then combined with the oysters and their precious liquor to create a stew that was both rich and delicate. Smart cooks knew that the secret was in the details. A pat of butter floating on top, a sprinkle of fresh parsley for color, a dash of paprika for warmth. This was celebration food that proved special occasions deserved special treatment. Corn chowder. Summer's sweet corn found its perfect expression in corn chowder, a soup that captured the essence of American abundance and transformed it into liquid sunshine that warmed hearts, even on the coldest winter days. This was farm-to-table cooking before anyone called it that, celebrating the simple perfection of fresh corn at its peak. The best corn chowders started with the freshest ears available, preferably picked that morning from backyard gardens or local farms. The kernels were cut from the cob with careful precision, but smart cooks knew the real treasure was in scraping the cob with the back of the knife to extract every drop of sweet corn milk. This creamy liquid was the secret that made homemade corn chowder infinitely superior to anything that came from a can. The traditional preparation was simple but effective. Salt pork or bacon provided a smoky foundation, while onions and potatoes added substance and flavor that made families feel connected to the land and seasons. Beef stew. Technically more stew than soup, this hearty creation earned its place in every 1950s kitchen because it solved the eternal problem of making tough, inexpensive cuts of meat taste like something special. This wasn't just cooking. It was kitchen alchemy that transformed humble ingredients into something worthy of Sunday dinner through nothing more than patience and proper technique. The magic began with browning the beef until it developed a deep, rich crust that would flavor every drop of the finished stew. This step couldn't be rushed. Each piece had to be properly seared to develop the complex flavors that would make the difference between ordinary stew and something extraordinary. The vegetables were added in careful sequence, each one timed to reach perfect tenderness without falling apart. What separated great beef stew from merely good beef stew was the understanding that time was the most important ingredient. The slow, gentle simmering process that turned tough chuck roast into fork-tender morsels couldn't be hurried, rewarding careful cooks with profound satisfaction. French onion soup. Long before it became a restaurant staple, French onion soup was the ultimate test of a 1950s cook's patience and skill. This seemingly simple soup required hours of careful attention to transform ordinary yellow onions into something so rich and complex it could serve as an elegant first course for the most sophisticated dinner party. The secret was in the onions themselves, slowly caramelized until they turned deep golden brown and developed the sweet, complex flavors that made this soup legendary. This couldn't be rushed. The onions had to cook slowly over low heat, stirred frequently, until they reached that perfect point where their natural sugars had caramelized, but not burned. It was a process that filled the kitchen with an aroma so intoxicating that neighbors would find excuses to stop by. The rich beef stock provided the depth needed to support the sweet onions, while the traditional Gruyere cheese topping, broiled until bubbly and golden, created the perfect contrast of textures and flavors. Mulligatawny. This exotic soup brought a taste of British Indian fusion to American dinner tables, proving that 1950s housewives were more adventurous than history often gives them credit for. Mulligatawny was sophisticated international cooking that could be accomplished with ingredients found in any well-stocked American pantry, making it the perfect way to add excitement to weekly meal planning. The foundation was a rich chicken broth enhanced with curry powder, that magical spice blend that transported taste buds to far-off places, while remaining familiar enough not to frighten conservative palates. The addition of rice, apples, and coconut created a complex flavor profile that was both exotic and comforting, satisfying adventurous eaters while remaining approachable for the whole family. What made mulligatawny special was its ability to make ordinary chicken soup feel like an international adventure. The curry spices added warmth and complexity without overwhelming heat, while the fruit and coconut provided sweetness that balanced the savory elements perfectly. Cream of chicken soup. The more sophisticated cousin of chicken noodle soup, cream of chicken soup represented the height of 1950s comfort food elegance. This wasn't just about using up leftover chicken. It was about creating something rich and luxurious that could serve as the foundation for countless other dishes, while standing proudly on its own as a satisfying meal. The secret was in creating a proper roux, that careful combination of butter and flour that would thicken the soup without creating lumps or off flavors. This required patience and constant stirring, but the results were worth every minute of effort. When combined with rich chicken stock and tender pieces of chicken, it created a soup that was both hearty and refined. Smart cooks discovered that cream of chicken soup was incredibly versatile. It could be thinned for an elegant first course, thickened for a main dish soup, or used as the base for chicken and dumplings, chicken pot pie, or countless casseroles. Pea soup. Not to be confused with split pea soup, fresh pea soup was spring captured in a bowl, celebrating the brief season when tender young peas were at their absolute peak. This was seasonal cooking at its finest, requiring perfect timing and gentle handling to preserve the bright, sweet flavor that made fresh peas such a treasured ingredient. The best pea soup started with the freshest peas possible, preferably shelled just before cooking to preserve their delicate flavor and vibrant color. The cooking process was brief and gentle, just long enough to tender the peas without dulling their bright green hue or losing their sweet, fresh taste. Many cooks finished the soup with a swirl of cream and a sprinkle of fresh mint, creating something that tasted like spring itself. What made fresh pea soup special was its limited season and the work required to prepare it properly. Shelling peas was a family activity, often done on the front porch while catching up on neighborhood news. Tomato rice soup. The marriage of Campbell's tomato soup and leftover rice created one of the most satisfying and economical soups in the 1950s repertoire. This wasn't just about stretching a can of soup. It was about creating something heartier and more substantial that could serve as a complete meal rather than just a starter. The beauty was in its simplicity. Cooked rice added to tomato soup created a dish that was both familiar and new. The rice absorbed some of the tomato flavor, while adding texture and substance that made the soup more filling and satisfying. Smart cooks learned to add the rice at just the right moment, allowing it to heat through and absorb flavors without becoming mushy. What made this combination work so well was the way the rice complemented, rather than competed with the tomato flavor. It added substance without overwhelming the clean, bright taste that made tomato soup such a favorite. Some cooks enhance the basic combination with herbs, vegetables, or small pieces of leftover meat. Bean and ham hock soup. The smokehouse met the soup pot in this hearty creation that transformed one of the most economical cuts of pork into liquid gold. Ham hocks were inexpensive precisely because they required time and knowledge to unlock their incredible flavor potential, making them perfect for cooks who understood that the best things came to those who waited. The magic happened during the long, slow simmering process that extracted every bit of smoky flavor from the ham hock while rendering the tough connective tissue into rich, silky broth. The beans provided substance and protein, creating a soup so hearty it could serve as a complete meal with nothing more than cornbread for accompaniment. What made this soup special was its ability to create luxury from scraps. The ham hock was essentially waste from more expensive cuts, But in the hands of a skilled cook, it became the star of a soup that satisfied both body and soul. This was cooking that connected families to their agricultural heritage. Mushroom barley soup. This earthy, satisfying soup brought together two ingredients that seemed made for each other: nutty barley and rich mushrooms, creating a combination that was both rustic and refined. It was vegetarian cooking before anyone called it that, proving that meat wasn't necessary to create deeply satisfying flavors and textures. The secret was in treating both ingredients with respect and understanding their individual cooking requirements. The barley needed time to soften and release its starches, thickening the soup naturally, while adding its distinctive nutty flavor. The mushrooms required careful cooking to concentrate their earthy essence without losing their tender texture. What made this soup special was its ability to satisfy even the most dedicated meat eaters. The combination of barley and mushrooms created such rich, complex flavors that no one missed the absence of meat. It was hearty enough to serve as a main course, but elegant enough to serve as a first course for company dinners. Seafood cioppino. This Italian-American fisherman's stew brought the flavors of San Francisco's wharves to family dinner tables across America. It was celebration food that transformed the day's catch into a soup so rich and complex it could serve as the centerpiece for the most special occasions, while using ingredients that fishing families considered everyday fare. The foundation was a rich tomato base enhanced with wine and herbs, creating a broth that could support a variety of seafood without overwhelming their delicate flavors. The beauty of cioppino was its flexibility. It could showcase whatever seafood was fresh and available, from simple fish and shrimp to elaborate combinations that included crab, clams, and mussels. What made cioppino special was its communal nature. This was food meant to be shared, served with crusty bread for sopping up the precious broth, and accompanied by plenty of napkins for messy, joyful eating. It brought families together around the dinner table in a way that few other dishes could match. Rice and chicken soup. The ultimate comfort food for families dealing with illness or simply seeking something gentle and nourishing. Rice and chicken soup represented the healing power of simple, perfectly prepared ingredients. This wasn't just food. It was medicine served in a bowl, providing both physical nourishment and emotional comfort when it was needed most. The preparation was deceptively simple, but required careful attention to timing and seasoning. The chicken had to be cooked until tender, but not overcooked, while the rice needed to be perfectly cooked without becoming mushy. The broth provided the foundation that tied everything together, creating a soup that was both substantial and easily digestible. What made this soup special was its universal appeal. Children loved it because it was mild and comforting, while adults appreciated its clean, straightforward flavors. It was the perfect soup for sick days, busy weeknights, or any time families needed something that felt like a warm hug from the inside out. This was nurturing food that proved the best meals came from simple ingredients prepared with love. These 25 soups represent more than just recipes. They were the liquid foundation of 1950s family life, connecting generations through shared bowls and satisfied sighs. In every spoonful was the story of American ingenuity, resourcefulness, and the eternal truth that the best meals come from simple ingredients, transformed by patience, skill, and love. They remind us that comfort food isn't just about taste. It's about creating connections, memories, and the kind of satisfaction that can only come from a meal prepared with care and served with love.